This is a day where apparently a bunch of people are all streaming at the exact same time, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm going to be doing Bible study at the same time I always do Bible study. So you got 5 minutes to get your Bibles open to 1 Samuel chapter 2. Okay? You know what? We got enough people who are already watching, and you guys are already here. So I say we just jump into it and not wait. Because
I
Jason,
agree.
sometimes you get called away very quickly. And so I want as much time with you as I actually get. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good to me. That 5 minute intro is getting long.
Yeah. It goes on forever. I was originally told there was a 2 minute intro as well, but I
There
can't
should
find
be.
it.
If you go over to where is it? If you go to brand, let's see, go scroll down on brand. Oh no, there isn't one in here.
Yeah, I got
Um,
video clips. I got a 30-second and a 5 minute. Like, Cassandra's here too. We're just ready to start. Okay. You guys
okay.
have come prepared.
Sandy's here.
Look at
What?
this. Look at this. Why should I wait? Why wait?
Yeah.
This is perfect. How's everyone doing today? Jason is partaking in occult practices as we speak.
Got a little. My nephew gave me a little rock today. He said he found it. It looks like a little emerald or something.
That's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I know. He said he
Michael,
found it outside of the Creation Museum. They went there in Kentucky. You know, who was that? Ken Ham? Who did that? I can't remember.
yeah, it's Ken Ham.
Yep.
Nice.
I,
Well, if they're
I
finding
gotta tell
emeralds
you,
outside of it,
I
you
gotta
know.
tell you, some of those museums look like a lot of fun, but I do not endorse that guy at all. He is a snake oil salesman, but I gotta tell you that snake oil looks pretty cool. I want to play with life-size dinosaurs. I want to. I want to see a floating zoo. I want all these things. I just don't like Ken
A
Ham.
floating zoo.
Michael, how are you doing?
Um, I was okay until you started bashing my favorite creationist.
He's your favorite?
I don't know. I think I like that he does not care how embarrassing the things that he says or does is, and I respect that quality about him. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Sandy, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm looking distracted because I'm busy answering I'm busy answering a connect between childcare and government question for someone.
I accept if you're on mute because you're doing more important things. Cassandra,
Only
can you
temporary.
represent the Filipino community's opinion on Ken Ham?
You know, I'm gonna be honest. I've learned so many new people just watching everyone in this corner, like names I've never heard of.
Don't
Maybe
do it.
because I'm in California in North though, but I've never heard of these people.
Yeah. It's a
You should look
particular
up.
kind of evangelical. Jason, you know who Ken Ham is, right?
Yeah. There's a fun clip of him and Bill Nye going back and forth, and it's just, it's quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something else.
yeah.
It's
Every
very-
time
You know,
somebody just says, obviously this guy's crazy. It always just makes me want to be like, I gotta check it out. I gotta see. Is he really
Yeah.
crazy? And
I-
I always
Look.
find there's something there.
I don't care to say it. I find some of Ken Ham's arguments to be solid arguments. I also think he's a crazy person and that he's a degenerate. If you look at his personal life, he's not the kind of person to listen to, and how he spends his money is not something you should donate to.
there's a there's a
some of his
weird
argument-
appreciation I have for it. It's the same thing like with Ray Comfort. Like I kind of really appreciate Ray Comfort, but then at the same time, I'm just like I don't quite know how to take him seriously. Like with
Yeah.
the whole banana argument and stuff. I'm just
I think if you're in this corner, you have an affinity for kind of crazy people.
Yes, it's also pop music sometimes. Sometimes pop music, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is the best, but I get it. I like it. It's fun. Some of those videos are a lot of fun.
yeah.
All right, let's get into the Bible, shall we? Instead of you guys all telling me your personal problems with Ken Ham.
I will add my 1 cent worth of anything I know about him, which is nothing. But one of my friends who's atheist made stopping there one of the primary points of his tour of the States a few years back, just to go see it.
It looks like so. It's
A
one of
pilgrimage.
those things. It's like it doesn't matter how terrible it is. I'm interested. So I think it's in Florida. What's his name? Oh, I can't remember their name. But there was a televangelist that created Christian Disneyland. So he like tried to create the first century Jerusalem, and every single day at 3:00 Jesus gets crucified, and you can like visit this and stuff. And I've seen videos, like clips of it. I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, that looks like it'd be a good afternoon. Like it doesn't. I can't stop.
But the one I want to see is there's a church in Mexico where they have the largest statue in the world of the infant Jesus. So it's a giant baby statue in their church, like 19 feet tall or something.
The Holy Land Experience, HLE, was a Christian theme park in Orlando, Florida. Orlando's got it all. Man, Florida's so weird.
We have William here too. Yeah, a lot of wrenches have been thrown into things. Okay, guys, stop getting so distracted. Let's get to the Bible.
Where are we in the text here?
We just finished.
Oh, the worthless sons.
Where Hannah was accused of being drunk, which a friend of mine let me know that in a lot of pagan traditions, and I was like, oh yeah, they would use, like people in the corner have heard about people using ayahuasca and things like that. Yep. But in many traditions, there was sacred drunkenness and things like that that people
No
would
way.
partake of. So
I've
he's-
done that.
one of one of the opinions is that Eli thinking that Hannah was drunk when she sang her secret prayer is like, not another pagan drunk saying her prayers. Like, get out of here. Yeah. This is so great. Sandy isn't a Bible character, but she is a favorite too. Okay, let's get into the text. Cassandra, Cassandra, I'm going to get you to read first.
What chapter is this, real quick? I was gonna
This
follow.
is chapter 2.
Oh, okay. Oh,
1 Samuel, chapter 2,
nice.
verse 12.
Okay. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. The custom of the priests with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servants would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said, "Let them burn the fat first, and then take as much as you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now, and if not, I will take it by force." Thus the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the men treated the offering of the Lord with contempt.
This is great. Great. Well, sorry, this isn't great. I should be. I don't mean this is great. This is terrible. These guys are the absolute worst. So these guys, did it say their names? Hophni and Phinehas. The two sons of the high priest are doing this stuff, and they're stealing the meat as an offering for themselves, because the choicest part was some of the bit that would be that you were supposed to leave as like an offering, and they're taking that for themselves. And it says right through, just to make sure, because as it's describing these things, it says they're worthless men. Let's be specific. As we're getting into it, don't you dare think for half a second that these guys are okay. They are worthless men. I like this is kind of like the mood music where you know that this guy must be the serial killer because the music is playing in the background. This is the music in the background. These guys are worthless fellows.
So I like that it says it goes through all the different things. Like it feels like the text for some reason is it says the pan, the kettle, the cauldron, or the pot, like all 4 of them. I don't know why it does that, but it's kind of interesting to me. Why is it a 3-pronged fork, by the way? Does anybody have any ideas on that?
A lot of
Trinity, because of the Trinity.
Oh, of course.
You gotta stop.
That's
that. Right. Michael, please.
Yeah. Why did I ask?
Yeah, of course. But then, why is it being used in this sinful fashion, Michael? A lot of forks used to have only 2 or 3.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I actually don't know why. I like the image that I found for this. It's like a giant. It's like a pitchfork almost. Like it's like those Flintstone ribs that are like being picked up. You know, like these.
Well, I guess one of the reasons I asked you. Well, when I read that, it made me think of because when I was in India, I see that all over because that's what Shiva holds. And so you see that 3-pronged fork all over the place. But
well, that's what isn't that what the devil has too?
Yeah, that's true.
Pitchfork.
That's not a pitchfork. It's not a pitchfork.
Okay.
He has Poseidon's trident. That's what that
What?
is.
Really?
Yeah, Poseidon's trident. He's a combination of like Greek gods, the pan gods, that was the gods that people work with. Because the word for God is daemon. And so Christians started referring to evil spiritual beings as daemons, because these were the gods that people prayed to. Anyway, yes, back to the text. I don't know. It is interesting because I'm trying to figure out exactly what the sacrificial system looked like. I didn't think anything was boiled, but here they're being boiled.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The worst way to eat meat, which I guess is why they wanted it raw, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and boiled meat is not as nice as actually grilling it. So I wonder
Have
about
you
them.
have you had boiled hot dogs? They're pretty tasty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
I
had
mean,
boiled.
well,
Not
I
great.
mean,
You don't like them? I think
there's
there's something to it.
I was raised on boiled hot dogs.
Yeah. Once
So
they
was I.
split, when they split, that's how you know they're done.
There's a nostalgia to it. I don't know. It's something
The
there.
only useful thing is that my grandma would use the hot dog water to make one of those little traps for wasps, yellow
Oh.
jackets, and then they'd go and drown in it. And that was like
Oh, there you go.
its only real use.
The wasps like the hot dog flavored water. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
well, I think there probably is some distinction here in that where they're wanting the meat to roast, because there's really not that much meat that's good to like grill or roast on a animal. Most of the joints and all like the steaks are like the prime cuts, and boiling is like the way that you cook all of the less prime cuts, because the meat's tough. It takes longer to break it down. So I mean, I think it could be that like if the priests are wanting the stuff that to roast it, they're wanting the parts that are the best parts, and the as opposed to whatever's in the pot or whatever. So
I
There's that.
guess.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was gonna say. I think I read somewhere it said that the portion they were supposed to take was like part of the breast and the shoulder or something like that. Like there are specific parts that were for the priest, correct?
Yeah, and I really wish that Hezi would jump on to be able to, because some of this stuff I'm like, you have to get pretty deep in the weeds to have a better understanding of what some of the sacrificial stuff, like what the rituals actually walking through looks like.
Well, I was going to say there's that parable in Ezekiel about the boiling pot too. So it seems like it was going on there as well, because he's got a whole parable about like putting the choice meats into the pot and boiling it over so that the scum will be cleansed from it and everything.
Yeah.
well, there is a note here for where the part. Let's see, Leviticus 10, 14, and 15 is what the priests are supposed to eat. Yeah, you and your sons and your daughters may eat the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. Eat them in a ceremonially clean place. They have been given to you and your children as your share of the Israelites' fellowship offerings. The thigh that was presented and the breast that was waved must be brought with the fat portions of the food offerings to be waved before the Lord as a wave offering. This will be the perpetual share for you and your children, as the Lord has commanded. So, yeah, so there was some particular parts that were supposed to be for the priests, and then they didn't. It wasn't just whatever they decided they wanted. So.
Okay, you know what? Unless Hezi comes on, Hezi comes on, I don't know what we're doing. So let's I think we should just move on with the text.
All right.
But either way, their sin was very great. And this idea of if you will not give it now, and if not, I will take it by force. So these guys are not nice guys. They're going to rough you up if you don't let them defile God's sacrifice. Boom.
Maybe this is a good passage to read when your kids complain about what's for dinner.
Yes, Michael.
You're
Good
treating your mother's dinner with contempt.
I like it. Okay, Sandy, go ahead.
Samuel was ministering to the Lord. Sorry, I'm checking if I was on mute. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod. And his mother used to make him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord." And so they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord.
Great reading. Okay, so one of the things that we see within this is, we talked about this last week. She gives the firstborn, which is Samuel, to the priesthood, but God blesses her for giving those first fruits with all this other stuff. Like he blesses Hannah with more children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, besides him. So it's a bigger thing. Hezi has mentioned before, I've heard him talk about, that Samuel gets known as the guy with the robe. Where you get, I just think this is very sweet. And his mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So yearly she goes up to make sacrifice, and when she makes pilgrim, she gives her son, there's Hezi right there, gives him a coat, right? It's like, I knitted you this sweater is kind of the thing that happens every single year. And so he gets known as the guy with the coat, which I think gets referenced when with the Witch of Endor, I think is when that comes up.
I guess you should mention, because we talked about how, the similarity between Hannah's prayer and Mary's prayer, and then, saying like if Mary is similar to Hannah in being blessed, that part of Hannah's blessing was having more children, which, just to say, like, it does seem like that's the kind of the pattern in the Hebrew scripture, that there's a little bit of disconnect for people who say that's not the case.
You are. Michael is an anti-papist. Just to be clear.
I mean, he seems like an interesting guy, but
yeah. And then aside from that too, there is a little bit of, is it up here? The language of him maturing is also very similar to the language that's used elsewhere about Jesus. No, I think that's somewhere else.
no.
Oh, I think
Hezi,
that's
transitional object. What do you mean by that?
Verse 26.
Was it 26?
We're not there yet. But.
Okay, great. Yes, yeah, that's where it's going to be. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
Well, I didn't know what Hezi meant by this. Do you know what he's talking about? There he is.
Oh, Joseph, thank you. What's the deal with burning? What's the deal with the sacrifice being in water and the 3-pronged fork? Please help us.
Sorry, I have not watched any of the episodes. I haven't not been following. Jason just sent me a link. I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, well then, all right. So the Hophni and Phineas.
Yes.
When they are the worthless sons.
Yeah.
I don't recognize this at all. As far as what they're doing, in what situation meat was boiled as part of.
Give me a verse number, chapter. Beginning of Samuel. 2. So was that Samuel 3? Maybe?
First Samuel 2.
2. Okay.
Yeah. And that's the verse. It starts in 12.
Okay. Give me like a minute or two.
Yeah, take a second. Take a second. And also Adam is asking, what is this yearly pilgrimage? He's specifically asking if it's Yom Kippur. We know it can't be, in my opinion.
It's not. Yeah. Well, Yom Kippur is not one of the yearly pilgrimages. There's
No.
3, right? Rosh Hashanah, sorry, not Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot.
Yeah, and we specifically know that for Passover, it says that the meat may not be boiled.
Well, that's just for the Passover sacrifice, right? There's more than one sacrifice on Passover. There's also the chagiga offering, which is, I mean, it's not boiled either, but okay. Well, there's multiple questions there. First, the animal sacrifice part we probably can answer a little bit easier. We generally associate this with Rosh Hashanah, which is weird because, of course, Rosh Hashanah isn't a yearly sacrifice. But it seems that it's not one of the annual festivals, actually, because those were just talked about in the end of Judges, because it says to fulfill his vow, which implies that he made a vow to come once a year for something that happened to him, and that this is not, it's not actually a holiday at all, but it's just his vow for his annual family pilgrimage. There is another, and there's parallels to that in ancient Near East, and there's another reference, I think, with David about something like an annual vow.
Yeah, holding his vow, and that happens also with Absalom. He says, "I made this vow, and so I have to make pilgrimage." It's outside of Jerusalem that he does it.
Yeah, and we find that same exact wording actually, that it comes miyamim yamima, which usually just translated as annually or year to year, but really means like it comes from the word day. In fact, this was coming up with Jason, and Jess was talking about this word because it's connected to the daughters of Job. But anyway, we just heard about the same phrase with Yifta in Judges too, where the women who mourn his daughters, whatever happened to her, come also like on their own. They basically have their own ritual that they've come up with to honor her, right? And they do this 4 times a year, so from like days on end, days of yore, year to year on that day, that kind of thing. Okay, bring back to your main question.
So in terms of the day, Joseph, could it even, like, does that mean it would even allow for something as simple as Hannah saying they would bring Samuel when he was weaned? Does it have to be on a festival, or could it just be coinciding with whenever they brought him?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to coincide with the festival at all. In fact, likely it would not have been a festival. I mean, it was likely tied to his actual birthday when he was weaned. Right, so the weaning ceremony is at 3 years old, I believe, right? So and we have that same thing happen in Genesis with Isaac's weaning. We hear about that in a little bit of detail too, right? So there's one of we happen to read on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. We associate both the birth of Isaac and the birth of Samuel with Rosh Hashanah, so we read those 2 readings together on the first day of Rosh Hashanah.
I also think that it might be related to that too, because for those who don't know, the tradition of Yom Kippur traditionally is given after the sons of Aaron are killed for bringing the strange fire. And so these 2 sons of the priest receiving judgment in Jewish tradition, Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the days of awe, where it's considered that you have this last period of repentance before Yom Kippur, before the day of and the Day of Atonement is basically your last chance to switch which side you're on, your last chance to repent, and that is a good example of what is just happening in the text, where it's like his sons are just about to die. We are introduced to this problem that needs to be addressed, but it won't be addressed for another chapter. Okay.
Joseph, I had some other question too, because Hezy's talking about the coat a lot, and I know he's brought it up in the past before, Samuel having the coat, his mom made him this coat, and there seems to be like a lot of different connections and symbolism that go along with that I'm not quite that familiar with. But he was even relating it to Joseph's coat. or something.
Yeah, I mean, the coat thing is a long flowing motif through the text, but obviously we can already connect Saul, Samuel, Elisha, Elijah, and David all together at least in one unit. And then whether you want to compare it to other coats like Joseph, sure, yeah. But certainly the other five are connected by Samuel's coat very explicitly.
Yeah, and he's saying also the ephod of the high priest.
Yeah.
What does ephod
Maybe
translate
I don't know
to?
if I don't know if I'd go there, Sezzy, because the high priest wears the me'il. Why would you say it's connected to the ephod and not the me'il?
Well, Hezi did not come out. He has no response for you.
Um,
Kirk, what was your question?
I was asking, what does ephod translate to?
It doesn't have a translation. It's a type of
it's like a
garment we do not have.
ceremonial garment.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think I made this RV too smoky. Oh gosh.
This is why you don't partake of paganism, Jason.
Not in such small spaces. Oh my gosh.
Let's continue on, shall we?
I mean, sorry. So to answer your initial question, there's basically what all these commentaries are essentially pointing out is that you would use these four, like the forks, the pans, the pots, like everything that's in this section, either with these words or with synonyms, are mentioned when they're in the tabernacle of the bronze utensils for the altar, for the copper altar. You can look up at Exodus 38:3. According to this, I didn't actually double check it, but I trust that reference. And I even have. There's even a picture here of what this fork would look like. Tongue would look like for cooking the meat. This is based off of archaeological finds that we have from similar ancient Near Eastern sites where they use these. These are part of just the vessels of the altar. And as far as the cooking method, so essentially, once something had been brought, like the priests were only supposed to take the breast and the right foreleg of the fat, right, not the fat. Some of the fats have to go to God, but they got the right leg and the breast of the peace offering, and clearly, and they could cook those any way they wanted once the offering was presented on the altar. So
right,
they could boil it, they could do whatever they wanted,
right.
So but it's clear here that they're deviating from acceptable what they're allowed to do, right?
Right.
So this is likely it says Zoveh Zevach, which Zevach could mean any offering, but usually it is specific to peace offerings, which would make sense because that is the one that priests are allowed to take from. But it seems that they're taking much more before than it's supposed to, and of course they're doing it in this way. That's rather problematic.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on in the text. Either Sandy or Cassandra, whoever starts reading first, you're the winner of today's Bible reading. I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay. Now Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all of these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear from the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death."
Oh, this little interaction. It is part of what I find particularly interesting is that Eli does rebuke them, but it stops at rebuke. Right? Like he should have his sons arrested. He should, you know what I mean? And so because he just says, guys, you have to stop doing this, it seems that he bears some kind of guilt himself, even though he has kind of proper theology here. I don't know if that sounds crazy.
Well, I mean, it said it was the Lord's will, so kind of like should he have done something more? I don't know. God knew he wasn't going to do something more, so. But you shouldn't have to arrest your sons. I don't feel like that's a good place to be in. Like, because they were supposed to honor their father, and they didn't. So.
But this is a repeated motif throughout the text. Saul, when he is rejected, one of the things that Saul is rejected for is he makes an exemption for Jonathan. He says, whoever breaks this one thing is to be put to death. And then he finds out it's Jonathan. He's like, never mind, I take it back. David, when his son Amnon sexually assaults his daughter, he doesn't do anything about it. And that is why Absalom rises up against him. We see the sons of Samuel will be corrupt as well. There seems to be this image of the corrupt children showing some kind of a problem in the system.
Because they don't get spankings.
Yeah, and of course you have in Proverbs at least, I think 4 times, the phrases like, one sparing the rod type phrases. I mean, they're not all quite that, and I don't love that translation, but something along the lines of sparing the rod spoils the child.
Right.
But often closer actually to this language, where they become, they abuse their position, their power there because they weren't properly given to.
Yeah, and it didn't even mention in the first bit. So they're defying the sacrifices, and they're also defying the women, right? Defiling what they're doing in their position of power. It's
Yeah, there's the way he says it too, when he says the report of the people coming back to him. I mean, it almost sounds like it's because it's spreading around that he's trying to get them to act right, because it's like it's an embarrassment. Maybe people know about it. It's becoming like a well-known thing that this is how they are.
Yeah, Hezi is saying that it's like, is it a rumor? Is that why he's not as strict about it? But yeah, I get what you mean. Where is it the action that's bothering him? Is it the report? Jason, you had your finger up.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a different question. I'll wait till you guys are done with this topic. I mean, it's in the same passage, but.
Well, why not bring it up now?
Okay, all right. What's the question he's asking? He says to his sons, like, I don't even understand that question. It seems kind of absurd to me. If a man sins against another, God will judge him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him? Like, why is he even asking that? That just seems... I don't know. Whenever there's questions in the text, I always usually just sit and try to really think over them.
When I was thinking about this, and I would love to hear other opinions, when I was sitting with this, the priest is the intercessor.
Yeah, all right.
So
that's why it seems interesting that he's asking that.
Yeah. And like the old statement, who will watch the watchman, right? Like, who's your in-between if you're the in-between, right?
Yeah.
And we have stories within the Torah of you cross this line and it's just, you're dead. There's no sacrifice for sin. You cross a specific line and it's just your life.
Yeah, it made me think about where it talks about too, if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it have flavor? So it's kind of that same thing that.
Right. Anyone else? Sandy, you look like you're about to talk.
No, I was just, okay. I was just thinking about Jason's question, because you answered and said, yeah, but the priest is the intercessor. But my understanding was that the phrase said, like, if you intercede, like if you do something against another man, God can be your intercessor, which would mean that God is not the priest. Like God is, but he is the one who shows mercy, who intercedes. So were you saying that Eli should have been the one to intercede for them? Was that your take on it? Or why did you say the priest is generally the intercessor?
what I'm saying is that when there's corruption at specific levels, there's no pleading. It just, there's almost like it is what it is. I kind of get that sense from, again, I'm relating this to the sons of Aaron who are destroyed when they bring the strange fire. That it's like we're not even supposed to mourn them. We're supposed to move on.
Like who intercedes for the intercessor type thing is what you're kind of.
Yes.
Well, that's not quite true, David. The nation mourns for them. Only Aaron is not allowed to mourn for them because of his special status. We actually do mourn for them, and part of things before is kind of marking their past.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, because it's specifically, Aaron is specifically told you're not allowed to mourn for.
It's only him and his two remaining sons who are told not to because they still have this job to do. They can't.
So if the nation mourns for them, is the nation kind of weirdly interceding for them, or just
what's
is the
mourning intercession? Why did I mean? What's
So that brings up an interesting question for me too. Well, A, is mourning a form of intercession? But B, I was listening to Rabbi Molla on his channel talking this morning to some of the Noahide things, and courts came up, and the thing was there are times when it says that the penalty for X, Y, or Z is death, but then he was also talking about the thing where you talk about if there is one case in 70 years where somebody is put to death, it's called a bloody court because that's not the actual desired outcome. And that reminds me of intercession, that God leaves grace. I can't phrase that right. I don't mean that.
No, I understand what you're saying.
No, because he isn't. Not that.
Do you guys think that I'm making too strong of a connection between these useless sons of Eli and the sons of Aaron?
No, I see a lot of parallels there. I mean,
I think there's parallels because if you're in a holy office, yeah, it's like you're closer to the fire. Yeah, I was just curious about the Sandy's question too. Is mourning a type of intercession? Because I think most of the time I would. Like the knee-jerk reaction might be to say no, but then I mean you have a lot of I know Christian traditions that pray for the dead and will pray for lost ones, and I just always, my mind always jumps to is it Rizpah or Rizpah? It's later in Samuel where she prays for the sons of Saul, and as she's mourning for them, and because David has to hang them or something, and she's mourning for their bodies, and then eventually he takes their bodies and buries them with the kings. And so it's like it feels like intercession, like she's interceding for the damned or dead or something, or because their bodies are hanging out there for the animals until he finally takes them and buries them with their fathers.
One of the challenges is the sons of Aaron. Did they, like, what is their sin, and is it something? I mean, I think some mourning. There are ways. There are things that are prayers for the dead. Like that is a tradition. It's not just Christian. I mean, like there is some, not so much biblical evidence for it, but we certainly have some kind of traditional stuff that we do. And what that actually means is complicated, and like there's a whole, the metaphysics and theology. Let's leave aside for it. But like, I think here, I mean, like the sons of Aaron. So after that happens, God says, "I was sanctified through those who are close to me," and it's a very ambiguous phrase, because are those who came close to me or tried to come close to me. So, and we got this idea of sanctification through, like, is it because they're holy? Because like there's something to their impulse that is recognized to actually be holy or worthwhile, but then it was used or applied wrongly. I think it's generally how a lot of people would read what happened there, traditionally. So like, it says Krovaya Kadesh, through those who, so that's right, through those who are close to me, I become sanctified. Or is that really referring to Moses and Aaron or the nation? Like, it could be like, who is it referring to? The question. Most people read it referring to the children. This is, I think, in contrast to what's happening here, where I think this is another two sons of a priest. They're dying, but I don't think there's any. It's really hard to say there's a justifying or like good impulse here, right? I mean, they're basically just out for themselves and fulfilling their lusts and gluttony, essentially, is what it sounds like, and they're using it to abuse power. I think it is interesting that one of their names is Pinchas, which is right. So which should bring up a whole other set of associations, right? Not the two sons of Aaron, but his grandson Pinchas, who's
the good guy in the.
Well, he is the good guy, but he's also he is a zealot who there's a real question about like his action, and like if God hadn't like basically given it a seal of approval afterwards, it would be hard to say that he was the good guy to some extent. Because so for those of the quick, right? So Pinchas, Book of Numbers, I don't know, late chapter.
It's with the Baal of Peor. It's with Balaam, where
So the daughters of Moab and are seduced, and Midian are seducing Israelite men, and I mean on purpose, because they're trying to seduce them.
It's a plan that
using the sexuality in order to bring them to worship their God, in order to upset the God of Israel. It would seem is the plan, so that God won't protect them. And one of the leaders of what prince of one of the tribes gets seduced, and he has relations with a princess of Moab, so like two elite people kind of being role models for everyone else, like of this plan. And they do it publicly, like they have relations like publicly, like in front of either, I can't remember, I think it's of the tabernacle and or in a tent near it, whatever. And Pinchas, who's the grandson of Aaron, who's not a priest at this point, goes and like spears them while they're in the act. And there's this rather ironic thing, because God basically then afterwards says, like, he did what I wanted, and there's a critique there that like no one else, like Moses and Aaron, like no one else acted. Well, I guess Aaron's dead at this point, but Moses didn't act. The other priests, Pinchas' father and uncle, didn't act, and Pinchas like took up. He was the guy who maybe he's younger, more impassioned, more zealous for God, whatever it is. There's a lot of reminders of Moses summoning the Levites to kill the people who worship the golden calf in that text. So and then God gives him. So what's ironic is God then makes a covenant of peace with him. So there's this whole like interesting play there, tension of like, yes, he's super zealous and did this thing that God praises, but then wants to direct him toward peace, which should remind us maybe of Moses, who uses violence in his youth, and to intervene for those who needed, proper intervention, but at the same time, his, let's say, his zealousness gets redirected. As this would also be true for the tribe of Levi as a whole, right? So Levi and Simon, when they go to avenge their sister's seduction or rape or whatever, do the same thing, and then Levi gets this whole covenant of essentially of peace, but to make him to redirect his energies elsewhere.
But he actually does, and I think a good connection with this is, but he actually does something. Whereas Eli in this story tells his, like, he doesn't beat them, he doesn't discipline them, he just says, guys, don't do this. Like, this is someone defiling the tabernacle.
And sleeping with women. I mean, that's the whole, right? He's doing he's the opposite of Pinchas, right? He's literally doing and Pinchas, remember, isn't just like a random like priest, whatever. Like he's this Pinchas's grandfather, right, or maybe great grandfather. He's named for, like, this is his direct immediate ancestor namesake, who like was right there not that long ago.
He did the opposite. He's
already like completely, that the line of the priesthood got corrupted so quickly is kind of part of the disturbance here, right?
Okay, let's go back into the text. Actually, let me do just a quick check. Jason, how you doing?
Good. Yeah.
Hey,
Sandy?
All fine here.
Okay. Sandy, any thoughts? Cassandra? No.
We lost.
I
Was
mean-
it Michael earlier who said something about God wanted, like, was resolved that they should die? Is he the one who commented on that?
yes,
You know-
yeah.
Well,
So
before we move on,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
I was
Joseph.
I was just gonna say, like, on that, like, I don't know if that was God was resolved that they should die, and therefore, no matter what Ellie said, it didn't matter, or that God, like, made sure that Ellie didn't have the right words, or if Ellie didn't have the right words, had the right words, but God, like, hardened their hearts, or, blocked up their ears so they couldn't hear the message. Right? I think it's very hard to tell what's going on there. Clearly, beyond the fact that, like, they deserve punishment and no one else is stepping up to punish them. Like, and this gets, in fact, to Jason's question on verse 25, maybe. Like, there is no Pinchas, like, because who's going to punish the priests when the priests get out of line? If not, and if the high priest is kind of ironic, because the high priest is asking them, but sort of as their father, right? Like, he starts this by, like, don't, my sons, right? As opposed to relating them as their role, he can't separate. Like, his fatherly duty kind of is taking over, which is fair. I mean, that's part of
It's
life.
the police chief who
Right.
addresses his children not as other police officers who need to be punished, but as his children.
Right.
Like, he's not within his role.
But he doesn't. I mean, he does rebuke them, but, like, it doesn't. Right. The fact that it doesn't matter. It's a weird question, Jason. I want to, like, acknowledge that it's a weird question, because, like, it would seem much more like an editorial narrative question than one that, like, that Eli should ask his son.
Well,
but
it's really mysterious. It's striking me as a really mysterious question. I don't know why. Because just the way it's, I don't know, the way it's phrased or something, or the way it's framed, kind of addressing the way mediation works or something like that. While you guys were talking, my mind was, like, hopping around it was like making all these weird connections with the question that Sandy originally asked, to the whole mourning and mediating thing, because it made me think of later on when the people take up for Jonathan, and you have, like, the people are actually taking up for so you have they have the high priest, or those that are higher up. You have the king and the priest and the judge, and it's like, if they mess up, right, who will intercede for them? Because it's like it's between them and God at that point, because they don't really have a mediator. But it's like, well, there is, if they aren't sleeping with all the women and taking the sacrifices and making them self-abhorrent to the people, then the people would actually intercede for them on their behalf, between them and God, and then them and the king, or something like that. But these people have, like, these two sons will have no one, because they're the people they're supposed to be serving. They're hurting, and so if they find themselves at a crossroads with God or something, it's like, who's gonna take up and speak kindly of them when the judgment's coming for them?
I want to step back from this framing. I think I don't know it's quite true to the verse.
Yeah,
because this is comparing sins against men versus sins against God, not sins against lower people, like, not sins that someone, like, lower in the hierarchy does versus sins that someone in the higher in the hierarchy does.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like, I think there is a difference there. Like, there's, like, the one that it's not that God is. It is about mediation and God, but I don't think it's quite the way that you're framing it.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to say, like,
I accept that I may have been wrong in the setup of it. I think also part of what I'm bringing in here is the idea of God being king, and it seems to be like offending a king, and that I see the tabernacle as like a dwelling place for God, and like it's his it's like a mobile palace, essentially. And so to be doing this is to be stealing food off the king's table. This is to be doing things which are deserving of death.
And I think I don't think that's wrong. I think that's a fair way to read it.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to say, like, these, like, frame it in terms of hierarchy, and, like, this sin is greater than another. This one, like, I wasn't necessarily trying to do that. I guess I was just trying to think of it as, I guess the way David's framing it too, you have the king. So if the king's kind of like Saul, then Saul makes this declaration, and the judgment falls on Jonathan. But then the people are like kind of standing in the gap because they love Jonathan, and so they kind of weirdly mediate for him. But that's what I was saying is I don't know. It seems like if the job of the priest is done right, then the people would mediate for the priest as well. Like it reminded me of Ecclesiastes. Even the king is served from the field. You know, that when you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteous, and don't marvel at it, because high
Well,
official watches
I
over
mean,
high
it's
official.
there's a reciprocal relationship. I think we see this with the high priest, and the cities of refuge. The fact that when like there's a link between, there's a link between. So when someone kills somebody, and it's not premeditated murder, it's like homicide, or manslaughter. Sorry, it's negligence or manslaughter type thing. So they can actually, if they kill anybody, first they can flee to the city of refuge, even if it's intentional. Then a court can decide whether it was intentional or not, and then they're allowed to stay in the city of refuge. If it was not, if it was negligence or whatever, if manslaughter, if it was homicide, then it goes into the other rules about whether they should be executed. But for people who do end up in the city of refuge, they're allowed that. There's a link between them and the high priest because they are allowed to leave the cities of refuge and return to their homes when the high priest died. And there's a whole kind of tradition about what are the connections here? Like, why is this a thing? And one of them is the high priest is in charge of the education system for the nation. They're supposed, like in the Torah, it says like they are charged. The Levites in general, but specifically the high priest is in charge of the system to make sure that people like learn how to treat each other properly. And live out the Torah, and the commandments, and therefore they're liable for people like not doing that to some degree, like they fail in educating people properly. So there's definitely something here where I think that in some way, and in fact. What would happen, Jason, is this interesting story in the Talmud where like there's a story that the mother of the high priest would go to the cities of refuge and bring food to the people who were there, because she was afraid that they would pray that her son dies so they can go home. So there was an interesting like reciprocal nature between like his failure has to be kind of rectified by their mediation and her mediation, so that he doesn't get punished for their failure, for his own failure, but his own failure which then cascades into the public.
That's interesting.
That's interesting balance.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
guys,
that's really good.
Let's go back into the text.
Wait,
Sandy,
did you do verse 26?
I believe we did. Did we not?
Okay, because I just want to say, like, it's important that Samuel is that's the cap, that he's good both in the eyes of God and people, unlike the failure against man and God of the sons of Eli, right? And I mean, this is exactly what the question came up. Like this is this theme, and this is a really important point to get to the kingship thing that you want to talk about, David, eventually, which is kings in ancient Israel, and leaders in general have to be accepted by both God and the people. They need both of those to legitimate them. And later in Samuel, it's going to be a big problem because Saul is going to have the support of the people, but lose God. David is going to have God and only gradually get the support of the people. And
when I was at Bible college, I knew people that received a call from God. But if you looked around at the people, the people did not agree. You claim you had some kind of a call from God. That's very, very different than whether or not the people will actually follow you and actually think you're a respectable person.
And this is part of this whole discussion about mediation. Right? I'm going to go after this comment. I know I talk too much when I'm on this. Right? Like, if you're going to be a mediator, you need to be acknowledged both by those that you're mediating for and the people or whatever you're mediating to. Like, you have to be acknowledged by both sides.
Right.
And like if you're only working from one or the other, like that's a real challenge to your legitimacy. You can't be a proper and full leader. And I think this gets into a lot of the stuff that's kind of at the end of Judges too, right? Where the people,
Right.
but like during the Civil War, they decide to follow Judah, right? There's this whole thing, and some of the things that happen in that are some of the groups and leadership is entirely man kind of proclaimed. But there is a point at some point where they start looking to God for like legitimating. So like who should go up first? They ask the Urim and Tumim, right? They ask Pinchas
Right.
to like ask God that. So you do begin to see that, and this becomes like a major theme of this book. So this kind of sets up
Yeah,
chapter
and
2.
that will be the downfall of these two brothers, is that they use the Ark of the Covenant like they can command God how things will operate. They bring in the Ark of the Covenant like it's a good luck charm. Okay, I wanna give a quick check in with Hezi. You have to wait because Yoav came in first. So Yoav, was there something that you wanted to share before we continue
Yes.
on?
I heard that one of the purposes of this channel is to teach people Hebrew, and I have a point of Hebrew that is bothering me.
Okay, go ahead.
The describing the sons as useless sounds to me inappropriate. I mean, unless you really want to be very gentle with them, I wouldn't call them useless. So I will look into the Hebrew, and the Hebrew is Bnei Belial, and the root of it is Al, which is above, and Yaal is to ascend. So Bnei Belial will be those sons that could not ascend. So it sounds to me like saying that they were in a position in which they could have ascended to a higher level, and they have failed to do that.
I might challenge that, Yoav. I might say they're banim they don't acknowledge that which is alehem, right? They're bnei Belial in that which they don't acknowledge that which is higher than them.
Sorry, I don't understand. What is your interpretation of the?
Yosef is saying that it's them not acknowledging what's above them, not them being unable to progress.
Okay, so anyway, it's come from the word to ascend, and from that it comes toilet is a benefit. How can I mean, toilet is how can I be lifted? And Bnei Belial as useless is coming for a derivative of to ascend, which sounds to me unlikely. Anyway, the modern use of Hebrew, Bnei Belial is just crooks, just simply crooks. And moving into the next chapter, because I want to go off stage, I want to remind you of my comment of last chapter, that the names of those sons sound Egyptian rather than Israeli.
Egyptian, yeah, I remember you saying
so
that.
Yeah, they don't just sound Egyptian; they are Egyptian. We know we have Egyptian names that match those from Lith.
So sorry, this is also very important because recently in archaeology, one of the things that we learned is that the Philistines were actually an Egyptian plant, essentially. No, you disagree? Okay.
Not genetic. Genetically, they're not Egyptian.
We definitely know that the Levites, though, Moses, Kehat, Merari, all these names are Egyptian names.
Correct.
Sorry to lose Yoav. I would just mention what Yoav said about Bnei Belial. Like, yes, you could look at Al as to ascend, like Elui. They have no ascension power. But generally speaking, when he says they're crooks, it's because they're Belial. They don't have a yoke, and that means they don't have the yoke of heaven. They're not under the morality of heaven. So that would lead to one becoming a crook. But the translation isn't just crook. It's, in the words themselves, like all. So this also relates to Olah as well, as one of the sacrifices one brings.
Well, and this is part of what I was saying, is that there's an aspect of Egypt which it's good to have included, right? Like the items of gold that will make the items in the tabernacle. but there's an element of Egypt which is bad, which is the elements of gold which make which make the golden calf, right? And so
Not to derail, but very shortly. I mean, that is what Joseph is trying to do in Egypt, right? He's trying to rise those holy sparks, try to bring redemption through Egypt. There's a move when Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt to try to do that move, and I don't know if Joseph is going to disagree with this, but I've mentioned in the past how there's also reason to believe how even the phylacteries themselves are taken from Egypt, right? There's a cultural appropriation over there that's being used and for a different purpose, and that's a lot of what you see happening in the Bible is using other cultures' tools, symbology, and through them, shining a divine light through. But like I said, not to derail.
Wonderful. That
I
is a
want
good
to
amount of derailing.
go back, not to derail, because this is exactly on the topic of Samuel 1.
Okay.
Samuel 1, chapter 1. Hannah,
Okay.
see you, Sandy.
Bye, Sandy.
Hannah says, "Don't think that I am." Sorry, I'll teach 10. Don't give your maidservant before the daughter of a Belial. She actually uses that. It sounds, the way normally it's translated is, "Don't think that I'm the daughter of someone who's Belial." And of course, literally the next chapter, his own children will be called Belial. But we had this word. This is one of those connections between Judges and Samuel. Remember, I talked about all these parallel words. So we had this for the people of Gibeah, where the rape of the concubine happens. They're also called B'nai Belial, the children of Belial. But we know that it can't just mean robber or something. Like I think there's more proof for how I read it and how Chezi reads it, which are pretty similar, which is in Deuteronomy, where the word first appears. We have it as it says, "Be careful that your heart doesn't become a heart of Belial." And to say, that no, the sabbatical year is coming, so I don't have to. I'm not going to lend them money, basically. So we definitely have this. I mean, this is one of these Deuteronomic words, right? So the Deuteronomic text from the old documentary hypothesis, which we're not fans of, but there's a lot of shared language in Deuteronomy and Judges and Samuel. And this is one of those key words, and it's going to come up a lot, honestly. Like I just pulled up a thing, and it's oh, this is going to come up another dozen times in the book of Samuel.
And I know that this might open a can of worms, but I'm just going to say this, and then Cassandra, you're going to read, okay? Is that this is also part of the notion of the kippah, of the yarmulke, is that it's supposed to be a reminder to constantly remember that God is over you. This notion of they were the people that didn't acknowledge what was above. But, even if this is not what the word says, I think Yoav is correct, that the people who don't acknowledge what is above are also those who cannot progress. These are infants, these are children, these are,
Well, we see that happening also with, with the battle with the Amalekites, right? Every time God raises his hands to the sky, they're successful, right? Once one realizes the proper orientation, then they could act successfully.
Jacob left a comment, but I think that's what we're talking about right at this moment. So maybe he'll catch up to it. He says, "I'm catching up, but you guys keep on ignoring verse 2:12," which I think is the one. I think that's the one where we just emphasized. So he's probably not there yet, but
yeah. Okay. All right, Cassandra, read. You are on mute. So though her lips were moving, she appeared as though she was silent.
And there came a man of God to Eli and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, did I indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, subject to the house of Pharaoh? Did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? I gave to the house of your father all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Why then do you scorn my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded for my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people Israel? Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, Far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. Then in distress you will look with envious eye on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed on Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared to weep his eyes out, to grieve his heart, and all the descendants of your house shall die by the sword of men. And this that shall come upon your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you. Both of them will die on the same day, and I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall go in and out before my anointed forever. And everyone who is left in your house shall come to implore him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread. And they shall say, please put me in one of the priest's places that I may eat a morsel of bread.
Great reading. I especially liked when you first started off, you really conveyed how upset God was with them. Like there was a little bit of, there was a good amount of upset. So I appreciate that. Before I get into it, I'm just gonna go through the list and see if anything that stood out or anything that wants to be mentioned. So Jason, you go first. Anything noticed or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's kind of later in the passage, but when God says, then I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do to what is in my heart and in my mind. I'll build him a sure house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. Who is that referring to? Because when he mentions sure house, that makes me think of David. But David's got that weird kind of thing where it's like he seems like he does some priestly things, but I don't know.
It's that according to the traditional readings, it's Sadok, who is
That's who?
the priest named Sadok.
Oh, the priest of Zadok. Yeah, Zadok. Okay. Yeah, the ones that didn't. Yeah, because they're mentioned in Ezekiel, I think, later on that God.
Well, so Sadok, there's a special promise that that the priests of the house of Sadok will be the priests forever. That comes up much later, but that seems to be what this is referring to according to the traditional readings, which makes sense because he gets the special call out and covenant later as this new priest. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead with your going around.
That's good. Yosef, you are next. Oh. Well, Jason, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I was just my I was plugging my computer in. It was about to die. So.
Okay, no, that's no problem.
Okay. I mean, so there's the verse 32 there that you'll kind of graze grudgingly, or you'll see what everyone else is getting, and you'll like the things I do that are good for Israel. But basically it says it literally means like your like your eye will narrow, and well, not just narrow, but my own is like it will get stuck. Like it'll get stuck in this this in this narrowed position of I would say like a perspective, right? Like a narrow perspective where you get stuck and you can't see anything else. And normally this phrase, this comes up in a lot in like rabbinic Hebrew in the Pirkei Avot class that Chazi's doing. Like you could talk about it, like that you have like a good eye and a bad eye. So like a good eye, often the way we understand that is like a generosity and like an open-handedness. But basically, this is what we would call a punishment that's midah k'neged midah. So it's like the punishment fits the crime or the sin here, where they wanted to get everything. They were greedy, and they kind of lusted after everything, and then that's like and so their eyes kind of will get stuck in this habit of like not being able to just like be happy for other people, but like kind of see the world in this very narrow, like jealous way, envious way. Maybe envious is a better word here. Envious way, and they'll never be able to have this generosity. And I think that's and somehow that kind of that narrowness, that stuckness, is tied to them dying young and not being able to kind of appreciate, like, even if they're left, even if they still get the position and still allowed to serve from the altar, like, I'll not cut off your offspring from my altar, but at the same time, like, they're going to stay there and mourn and pine away, and specifically their eyes, right? Their eyes, their eyes will kind of like come to an end almost.
And in the next chapter, it emphasizes Eli's eyes being dull, and that in those days a prophet was called a seer. Those are all elements within the text as well. Cassandra, any thoughts? Anything that stood out to you while you were reading?
Yeah, well, one thing I was thinking of, I think, because you pointed out how their names are Egyptian, it kind of made me think of when they were in Egypt and all of the curses fell on Egypt, but the people of Israel were fine. And even like when the darkness fell, you could see that where the Israelites were, everything was fine. They had light. They didn't have pests. So I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
That's good.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you meant, Cassandra, but that it almost could map on a little to, while that happened in a very physical sense, you could also say that, you know, where the Hebrews had light, again, this has to do with like sort of their capability to see things clearly and from a generous perspective, and those who only saw darkness, right, are those people that can't see anymore. So you could even say that from like a psychological point of view, or just a general outlook. Also, like, you know, there's a difference between the Egyptians and the Israelites with regards to how they saw the reality in front of them. You also, by the way, we finished Pirkei Avot. We're moving on next week with Shmone Prakim on Maimonides. So see how long that goes. Just with regards to this verse, there is I don't know if I mentioned this before, but with Korach, there is a midrash that says that one of the descendants of Korach is Samuel. He's also a Levite, and Samuel gets to manifest many of the things that Korach wanted, and that is happening in the context of this curse you're here right now with God and talking to the sons of the priest over here, which is, it seems like the priesthood had failed at this point, right? It didn't work out, and there's a full corruption over there. And Samuel, like Korach, says, like, you know, I want to flatten the hierarchy right now, and that's why Samuel basically doesn't take the tabernacle, the ark back to the tabernacle. He doesn't establish a Sanhedrin. He goes around the town himself and being a judge. He even himself brings sacrifices, which is really the job of the priest and not the Levite. So he really takes over fully, and he realizes that at a certain time, there is something to be said about flattening the hierarchy when there's corruption in order to create fertile ground for something new to grow. And that's sort of what God is also saying that's going to be required over here. And Samuel is that, you know, he's around through that transition. Eventually, obviously, it comes back. But there's something about Korach's idea that wasn't necessarily wrong. He was just wrong with his timing, and that relates
that's related to David too, where David is the quote unquote the usurper of the role of the king, but he doesn't do it in a rebellious way. He doesn't do it in a sinful way, which is the way that, you know, you think when you first start reading the story, oh, he knows he's in the right. He knows he has God's blessing. Why doesn't he just go and kill the Lord's anointed then? Right? He seems to be pursuing it in the proper way.
I also think there's this other thing to support what Chazi just said, which is like, but also it goes to the kind of the point of the checks and balances and the division of powers in ancient Israel, where there's this Ish Elohim at the beginning of the verse, right? 27. There's this man of God who has to come to Eli. Eli doesn't get to talk to God at this point. Maybe we don't know if he had prophecy before, but at this point, certainly, whether it's because prophecy can only happen when you're not in a distressed emotional state, which is a separate type of theme in the Bible, or whether it's because he is nogea b'davar, so he's it's too close to him, so like he can't, like he needs someone outside objective to mediate for him, right? So there's this flattening of the hierarchy almost. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a flattening of the hierarchy, but he needs someone else to basically mediate for him and God at this moment, which kind of goes back to kind of the irony perhaps in the question that Jason was dwelling on earlier, that Eli asks his sons. Eli himself now needs someone to mediate for him. And what's really interesting that like adds a whole twist to all this is, at least in the Midrash, who is this man? Like he's not just he's not named in the text. They say he's Elkanah. So this is Samuel's father, biological father.
Wow.
Okay.
So that like adds an entire other dimension to like what's going on here, right? If you read it that way, one father chiding another, but that other guy is also raising his son.
Right. Oh man. Kirk, do you have anything that you want to add, or anything noticed or thoughts?
Nothing that hasn't already been said. I mean, it seems like everything you said so far has made sense about flattening the hierarchy and about corruption. So not really new.
I loved something I haven't mentioned. I love the drama of this, which is there will not be left a descendant except for one man, and him only to cry his eyes out. Like, it's so metal, isn't it? It's like, it's so dramatically powerful. I love that reference.
So I do wonder, because my translation, and well, plus one, the Hebrew doesn't say one man, it says v'ish, which could be singular or plural. In my translations, it just has it takes it as the plural, like men. The men of your house will not be destroyed, or they won't be all killed. They'll just like have this as like this.
I think this is reference though, because unless I'm mistaken, is the last descendant is mentioned later.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it is Ichabod.
Well, it's not his last descendant. It's actually really funny because he does have other descendants that are talked about after the fact.
Right.
And in fact, even in the time of the Talmud, there were families that tended to die young that were specifically thought to be descendants of this household because they died young. And we could talk about, maybe they had some weird genetic thing, and we could talk about all that. But like that, they at least believe that there are people, and this was a sign that you descended from this household if your family died young from natural causes. Natural causes, God causes. But
this is interesting too. I wonder how this connects with Jason, and maybe just inadvertently, the important role of presenting the tragedy. That the person who weeps, who is in mourning, is manifesting the tragedy of the situation, so that it like sets the tone for how we're supposed to understand this. I'm going to leave someone who is mourning and weeping. That plays a role in making clear what's occurring. Does that make sense, Jason?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think at least in the context you're saying it, for sure.
There's also this weird thing in verse 35 where so this faithful priest specifically is going to walk before, like in front of my anointed one, my Mashiach, my Mashiach. Now, presumably this is actually referring to King David, because Tzadok, who is he is called this faithful priest, is the priest that's toward the end, I believe, of David's life, right? So there's a specific relationship there. I think that this text is prophesying, right, about the house of David and the house of Tzadok, and the house of Tzadok will be the priest for the house of David, forevermore, when this house gets built and comes about, which I have no idea how Christologically that gets read. I think that's actually a really challenging verse, honestly, because it clearly shows that these have to be separate things. And in fact, this entire now we've had a high priest and being told by a prophet what's going to happen about how the high priest needs to serve a king. So now we actually have almost the complete set of separation of power, like politics, of that comes through the book of Samuel.
Right. And oh, this is a can of worms. Jason's gonna love it though.
Okay.
In the Qumran community, and I found some references in the Babylonian Talmud as well. Melchizedek is referred to as a messianic character, where there needs to be this faithful priest, like this. He performs like a divine priestly role almost. Sometimes in the Qumran community associated Melchizedek with the Son of Man in Daniel, the cloud rider who would announce the year of Jubilee after the final day of our Lord, after the day of judgment. And I'm wondering about that language where it says that you go in and out before my anointed forever. It's connecting in my mind with the I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever at the end of that song, where it speaks of dwelling in God's house forever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So Qumran has a library, right? There's a collection of different beliefs there. It's not consistent, but there are clearly texts there that point to expectation of two messianic figures, a priestly and a kingly, three messianic figures, a priestly, a kingly, and someone like Moses, like a prophet, and four messianic figures based on the four. What do they call it? The
four craftsmen.
The four craftsmen,
or the four horns of the altar.
Four craftsmen. So we have evidence for kind of all four of those. And when we do hear about like a priestly messianic figure in rabbinic text, is almost always in the four craftsmen context. I actually can't. I don't think any of them come up in the other discussions, because generally we talk about two figures, the Davidic and Josephite, or son of Joseph and son of David, really. But there are some of the four craftsmen texts which do say also, like they, as you pointed out, it's not, I don't think it's Babylonian Talmud like that. It was the Jerusalem, and then also in some of the Midrashic collections. Maybe they wanted Babylonian.
The last interaction we had, I looked into it, and I know there's a reference in the Babylonian Talmud
possible.
to the four craftsmen.
I just don't remember that one offhand.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, no, and I think it does reflect the language of the psalm you talked about. It also should maybe remind you of a different curse that happens to the last king of Judah when he gets going to get exiled. Or sorry, not quite the last king, like the second to last king of Judah before he gets exiled to Babylon. And there's this curse that says your descendants will never ascend like the throne again. And then that curse gets undone in one of the early Second Temple period books. I'm going to forget which one, maybe Chronicles. We hear that curse gets lifted or undone or whatever with Zerubbabel. But we get a very similar curse of like your house, shall be no more, and you won't have a descendant do this again. And that gets reversed, interestingly enough. There's a whole question. And you talk about Qumran. We can also talk about the Samaritans, because the Samaritans actually have a very different understanding of what happens in this whole section, because they still preserve the genealogies of how their high priest, which they still acknowledge a high priest, like descends from these houses. And I believe currently their high priest actually comes from the line of Eli. So they had one from Itamar for a long time, but right now I think they have one from Eli. But they actually have a very different read of everything that's happening here. They actually see this as like this, almost like a political coup. And like this text basically isn't. They don't believe the story is real. They believe it was put in because they don't hold it. They don't hold it Samuel as scripture. They think that this was put in by the Jerusalemites, the non-Samaritan Israelites, Judahites, as a text that kind of to delegitimize their claim to actually having the true high priest. Because at the time, at least, when these debates are going on, their high priest was from Eli. And it's gone back and forth over the years, but there was Eli at the time, and they were like, this was a political coup against us, and they put this text in just to remove any claim that we could have, and just to justify the Tzadokite priesthood, and that's some awful thing, because obviously Tzadok and King David were wrong, because the real temples in Har Gerizim, not Jerusalem, all that.
Right. Well, and this is, I love Samuel for this reason. There's questions about God's leadership and the leadership that he gives to his people. And so there's to what extent there's the prophet, the priest, the king. These are all different roles that we see almost like tugging at each other with different levels of, so to what extent is the priesthood corrupt? To what extent? And so we see like all the things you were saying about the high priest in his relationship with bringing about justice and the cities of refuge. So what happens when that's corrupt? How do you deal with the kingship? Like these are all roles of God manifest in our lives, how we experience God's forgiveness, how we experience God's justice within this realm, especially in times when those things are corrupt. Chezi, you were gone for a bit. You've come back. Do you have anything you want to add before we close up? You are silent.
I said no. You could go on. I'm with you, but I'm also I'm working on my Bilam weekly portrait right now, so I'm doing both. Double dipping.
Could I ask a personal opinion of you, Hezi?
Sure.
So Jacob says he believes that Christianity could potentially be, and Jesus could potentially be the Josephite Messiah. But what do you think about that?
I don't think that's what Jacob says.
No.
I think I could be wrong. I think Jacob says that there are some sources, far and few between, that hint or reference that Jesus might have been a potential for a Josephite Messiah, assuming you believe that there's one in every generation or one in every family, but it's something that it's a pattern that repeats itself, but it was a failed version. It was a failed attempt that did not work out. But he doesn't believe that Jesus is the Josephite Messiah.
So you just believe it's possible.
What would make it successful?
If the messianic prophecies came true.
Yeah,
him not dying. What are the? Oh, sorry. Well, I guess I'm still confused because I thought the Josephite Messiah, how I had it framed in my mind, was just kind of like the suffering Messiah. And
no,
the Davidic Messiah is the one.
He leads the battle against Gog and Magog, and in the huge battle in the apocalypse like that. You need to fulfill that to become it.
Which Jason right now is like, wait, is that why they are referenced in? Yes, Jason, that's why that appears in Revelation.
Jason, I would say that there was a tradition where the Josephite Messiah, the Messiah son of Joseph, does die. However, there are interpretations where, and that's really the view of Judaism's view on prophecy, good prophecy and bad prophecy. Bad prophecy doesn't have to happen, right? It could be avoided. And so the Josephite Messiah dying is one outcome. It's not necessarily the outcome. And so there are some that see him ultimately being successful in his battle and surviving. I mentioned this in the past, but the name of the Josephite Messiah comes up in Jeremiah 31, where they mention his name, which is the son of Joseph is Ephraim, because that is the name of Joseph's son. And that's broken down to 4 different sequences, 4 different stages of the Josephite Messiah. And some in religious Zionism that we're on Jacob's stream that he opposes, of course, would say that we are now in phase 2 of the Josephite Messiah period, stage, time.
Very complex.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Hezi, but doesn't Gog, isn't that Russia and Umagog is Persia, Iran? Or do I have that wrong?
Let's not get into that particular bit. But it is, I do think if we're looking at the text and we're trying to resolve these issues, one of the issues is that the Mashiach character is a complex character, because if you're just reading Genesis and you're supposed to predict who the kings come out of, we talked about this a lot when we were going through Judges, you might say, oh yeah, obviously it's going to be a descendant of Joseph. There's a couple of different characters who would be leaders of the nation, who, if there is a Messiah, if there's a messianic figure that everything is leading to, there's a couple of characters that you say, oh, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be a priestly character? Could it be this Davidic character? Could it be, one where it's more like peace in the time of Solomon? So even when you're looking through, sometimes the four craftsmen will be a lot. Sometimes it's Elijah, sometimes it's Moses, sometimes it's Melchizedek, sometimes it's Aaron, sometimes it's Ephraim, sometimes it's Yeshua, sometimes it's Joseph. Right? We'll get these names because remember, Joshua is the son of Nun. He's from Ephraim, right? So will it look like that? Will it? What are we talking about? It's a bit of a mess. And so as a result, these different streamlines that say, no, this is what the Messiah looks like, takes a specific set of readings of a particular set of scriptures and says, this is the one we're talking about.
You mean?
David, I think you're tapping into or touching upon something that the Talmud talks about. The Talmud talks about, which is,
and the Talmud is a perfect example. Sorry, Kazi, just to cut you off. The Talmud is a perfect example because the Talmud is not, this is the answer. It's recording the conversations of different perspectives. Rabbi Akiva says this, but another rabbi says this, and both are recorded. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that there is an interpretation. There is in the Talmud, it mentions how two prophets could have the same prophecy, but it comes out in a completely different style. So you could be hearing sort of something that sounds very different, but there could be alluding to the same thing, but there isn't necessarily full clarity how that's going to look. And I would say you could. There's another term. I don't know, how would you say this in English, Yosef? Beita chishena.
Right. Like,
when the time comes.
Yeah, but it's like sleeping in potential. Like it's in, like it's going to come at this right moment, but it's like it's not there yet, right? Like
yeah, so correct. I was almost going to say, but maybe I'm wrong, sort of like in quantum mechanics, like when you observe it, it's actually happening, but you have to like observe it sort of, and you have to be like aligned towards that. So when you are ready, when you, Israel, are ready for the redemption, it will happen. Right. And the sense is that using that example, I would say that these prophets are many times are saying, okay, it could be like Ezekiel, it could be like Isaiah. There's different versions how this could play out, and it really matters sort of where you guys are at, and how this plays out depends very much on you, and it's a partnership. So there will be redemption. What exactly it looks like? Is it more pluralistic, where everyone, all the nations of the world are coming to the temple, or is it very much like, the one who's not circumcised can't come inside? So there's different versions that sometimes seem like they're contradictory. So I would say either they are different versions of the same thing in different styles, or they're different options.
Oh, that's interesting, because the Christian response is that both are true at different levels. And so this idea of a first coming and a second coming is like first coming like this fulfills these, second coming fulfills these. Because one of the things that Jacob has said is that Jesus might be the Messiah, but not yet. If he comes back and does all these things that you guys are saying, then he's the Messiah. But as of right now, to what extent?
Well, I think he would still say it's the Josephite Messiah. But
yes, sorry.
I guess also gets to Kirk's point earlier, or what he was asking about earlier, right? Which is, we have this idea that there's lots of people who are Messiah in potentia. Not like a million people, not like everybody, but like throughout history, there have been people who could have been the Messiah, if only, if only the people were ready, if only they actually took the right steps. Famously, Hezekiah, who didn't sing, as the thing, he didn't sing when he was saved, so he didn't become the Messiah, but he could have been the Messiah. And they say he was facing the Syrian king at the time, right? So the Tiglath-Pileser could have been Gog. But he didn't, like, that didn't happen because of this failure, of at all these levels. So we have this. The Messiah happens when it happens, and you can't really predict it beforehand. Like there's no, and you can't force it beyond doing the things that you need to be doing that are the right things in the first place anyway. Right, like that's part of this whole thing. But there's an attempt to really say, like, oh, this is definitely going to happen. This is really it. And as Scott was saying, like, you can't. Like, I was in part, and this, Dave, it gets to your thing. Like, Christianity has a very different take on this, in part because we're very open-handed. We don't have a book of Revelation. We do have a couple competing messianic visions. There's, I think, really 10 around the Davidic Messiah that we can identify. But we're much more open-handed with our eschatology because, like, it's not really the point. Like, the vision, ultimately, of redemption, and, that redemption is going to happen, is certainly the point, and belief in that. But, like, beyond that, like, do the things that God expects us to.
Okay, we are coming to a close end, but Jacob, Kirk was asking a question. Were you listening?
I was catching up this whole time, and I just want to say, so today is Yud Beit Tammuz, the 12th of the month of Tammuz, which is a minor Chabad holiday and is also my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy
How old are you?
I turned 47, and so we have a custom in Chabad of giving blessings to people, this honestly. So I have to say, I've been having a really hard week. My mom was in the hospital. She's fine. But this Bible study, it's just been so beautiful. Just want to thank you guys.
Jacob, I haven't talked to you in a while, and I've been wondering what you think of this. So I'm like, I hope he's still happy with me. So
this is the most beautiful. It just made my entire year.
Well, happy birthday, my friend.
Jacob, just before you continue that, you said that people give blessings on the birthday. So I just want to bless you that you should be successful in continuing to spread Hashem's word in the world so successfully in a beautiful, unique, and special way that you've allowed us to all be invited and part of. And may Hashem continue to give you strength, and may you should move from chayil to chayil, find happiness and tranquility in your life. And you should realize and recognize that you have already accomplished a tremendous amount. And you should feel honored that you are Mekadesh Shem Shamayim Barabim every day with this stream. So Ashrecha.
Thank you so much. I do want to actually.
Who else wants to make Jacob cry? Next person up, Jason. You make him cry.
I do want to go back to verse 2:12 though. I have to say.
That's where we started. Yeah, go ahead.
Hebrew is just so important, right? Because when you read it in Hebrew, first of all, it's a pun. It's the Bnei Eli, right? The sons of Eli were Bnei Belial, right? Mm-hmm. His name is in there, right? Lo Yadu Havaya. They didn't know God. And Belial, right? It actually appears in the Christian Bible as well, right? Mm-hmm. Because it is a name of a demon, right? Which I don't know. Was it a Near East like deity?
No. So it comes from Qumran's midrash actually. Okay. So Qumran takes this. Let's call it a ruach ra'ah, like a spirit of whatever, evil, but they anthropomorphize it into an actual being.
Right. So and it that verse creates a theme explaining everything else that's coming, right? Yeah. So the text has so many different levels to it, and honestly, I mean, to go back to the theme of my channel, if you don't know the Hebrew and you don't look into the Hebrew, you just whiz straight by it, because it's just, there's something so important about the Hebrew. And yeah, I just wanted to, and like when Yoav mentions the gematria and stuff, right? So this is what I mean when I say, like, a translation of the Bible, it can be like a beautiful picture, right? But it's like taking a picture of the ocean. That's completely different from going surfing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know? Okay, so sorry to interrupt.
Jacob,
No.
just to your point, just to stress your point, that Bnei Eli, Bnei Belial are like the sons of Eli, right? With those same letters are then reversed to they are no longer the sons of their father, right? They are turning their back to their father. The letters are reversed, and they're not and Eli is not with an aleph, which is like God, which is goes back to Eli like Elyon, right? So they are removing the yoke of their father, both physically and their father in heaven. So yes, that's
Yeah, and they don't know Havaya. They don't know the Tetragrammaton, right? So that verse is really important. Can't read Shakespeare when it's translated into Spanish. You certainly can't understand the sonnets as sonnets.
I remember being in Israel reading Shakespeare in Hebrew, and it was so sad.
Macbeth.
It was
Was
just like
it the
painful.
Merchant of Venice? Were you reading?
I don't remember which one.
Brutus.
It was just painful. But I was just gonna say, I really love that you came on. I should have actually like introduced myself. I don't think I've never been on a stream with him before. Not that I'm on stream so often, but I love we have another Hebrew speaker here who's trying to like delve into these layers. And yeah, thanks, Jacob. That's the pun, the wordplay. I
honestly am so honored, because I want to make sure that I'm representing the text well, and that I attracted enough Jews to tell me what's what. I really appreciate.
Michael Sartori made a really important point. Like the pitchfork of Satan is the Trinity. That's really important. That is the pitchfork. Like, it's right there. It's reading the Christological text. It's telling you that the Trinity is the pitchfork of Satan.
Did he connect the pitchfork of Satan to the pitchfork of the sons of Eli? Did I miss? I didn't hear the end of the stream. I have to go.
No,
Well,
yeah.
so
That
they
was
were
at the
asking,
beginning. It doesn't.
They were asking, why is it a three-pronged fork? And it's because of the Trinity.
Obviously.
Anyway, one of the I think we should be ending because we're drifting away from the text. Happy birthday, Jacob! But I think, and Jacob, I think you'll be honored by this too. Is that what I was saying last week, as an image that we have of the text, how it's introducing the role of king through the role of priest, and the way that I believe that the Ark of the Covenant was actually presented as though it was one of these chairs, like God's throne, God who is enthroned above the cherubim, right? This is spoken of within the text as well, that this is like his throne, that this whole book is about Melech Haolam, that the king of the universe. So this image of God's kingship, and so the importance of us recognizing what I think you were saying, Jacob, that which is above us, to not to become like these men, but to recognize that which is above us.
And that goes back to what Chazi was saying about how Blial is also understood as one without a yoke, right? Ol Malchut Shemayim, the yoke of heavenly kingdom, right? That is a really important way of understanding Blial, right?
Right.
And Eli, his name, can be understood as my yoke, right?
Right. And there is an importance in this idea that God wishes for us to be yoked. His yoke is easy.
Y-O-K-E, not Y-O-L-K.
David, I'll just say one little adjustment to that, right? Which is I don't think they're stealing food from God. I want to be clear about that. That's very clear in the
Yes.
text. There's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
right,
yeah.
like God is not like the pagan deities. He doesn't eat. Like every other
Yes.
pagan god,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
brings
yeah.
food and he
Absolutely.
feeds them. They're stealing something else from him, which is symbolized by the incense, right? Which is basically like, I mean, we can talk about it. There's a lot of symbolism in the incense, and we're not going to blow up your stream at the end of it, but like, it's this much more ephemeral act of obedience, and that doesn't have this. You're not giving. God doesn't need to eat. You're not stealing food from his table,
Right, right.
but they are stealing respect from him, right? They are stealing. Like they're not the generosity that he gave them in this job. They are spitting back in his face, basically, and abusing.
Yeah, that reminds me of
Right,
the.
right. No. I absolutely, I agree. I know. I believe that there's some kind of an illustration related to that where, like we've seen showbread being used in other traditions, and it is like the god is eating the bread. But in the Hebrew, their priesthood was very different in that their priests, it was the priests who ate the bread. It was like being fed by God, not us feeding God. Very different image. Sorry, Kazi. Okay, we gotta wrap
Jason
up.
at some point.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to keep you. You got to bust.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, go. We'll finish in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so that's my problem.
I was gonna say that just tagging on to what Yosef was saying about what's bothering God is also it's less about the food is taken, right? It's more about like their actions afterwards, and that is in contrast to what Eli is constantly getting wrong. Eli's focus is on the ritual, what's going wrong with the how things are being done in Shiloh right now, and this is also I mentioned this in the comments. What he gets wrong with Hannah, he gets mad because he's seeing something that's not usually done, and he's like, no, it's all about the ritual. It's all about how this is done, and he doesn't realize that not only are your sons corrupting that, but that was never the focus. The focus is, as we say, ben adam lechavero, man to his fellow man, and not like if you're corrupting that, like what Eli's sons are doing, the second layer of sins, then you're definitely going to get wrong the first layer of sins, which is like obviously taking advantage of the actual process. So I was like, that's another miss of Eli, which he's like, you could see that he himself, while he's not his sons, he's also missing the mark.
And this gets to Jason's point about that verse, about the question, right? Which is that he's saying, well, if he was saying like, oh, well, if this was man and man, it would be fine, but you're sinning man against God. But he seems to be missing, like, right, that it's the man and man thing actually does come first, and that's what God, that's the problem.
Okay, any other closing comments?
Only closing comment I would have is the chat was really interesting for a while. I didn't know what was going on. A bunch of stuff with like, oh my gosh, like that could be a whole nother stream at some point. I don't know what was happening.
Yeah. And
I was trying to ignore it because
Hezi, I actually really appreciate it because Hezi was actually engaging when he wasn't on here, was on there and was doing a very good job. Actually, Jacob, while I have you for a second, sometimes it seems like once I end the stream, the chat isn't saved on the video.
It takes a few hours for the chat to show up in the replay. So it immediately after the video, once you end the video, the chat goes away. It should be back.
So the oral tradition comes first, and then the written comes after. That's what.
Yeah, Jacob, you said your mom is she well or?
She's fine. She just she had some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in the hospital overnight for a couple of nights, but they just ran a bunch of tests and yeah.
Okay.
So she's fine. Yeah.
Are you doing a birthday stream after this?
So things have been difficult, but I'm actually thinking I might actually do some. Thank you, Hezi, for this.
What's this?
This is the Yanuka's book that Hezi sent for me. So I'm thinking I might do something out of here. or the other book Chazi got me from the Inuka.
Yosef, you're allowed to ask for books as well.
And so my parents were in Israel a couple weeks ago, and they brought me, because it's what a fair, they brought me back a whole bunch of stuff. Very excited. I got a new Kohelet. I showed Jason already. That's Ecclesiastes, and a new Hezkel, and a couple other things.
I love the book fair. This year, my
Sorry,
wife.
book fair doesn't do it justice. Americans will not understand. You have to explain that there's 2 weeks now, right? Not even 1 week. 2 weeks where like it's a countrywide book fair in like the public squares in the major cities. There's stalls from every major publisher in Israel, basically, and all the Israeli authors are there doing book talks for 2 weeks, and like everything's like 40% off, 30% off, whatever, like insane sales, and you can get like anything.
It's a huge
kids books.
Awesome.
It's more like a book
Like
feast
a
than a book
Jewish
fair.
Comic
Yeah.
It's a book festival. It's a festival.
Yeah.
But this year, my wife told me I can't go.
Oh,
Just because, like, we're
you have to read last year's books first. Is that
it's something like that? And like we moved, all my books are in storage. She's like, we have nowhere else to put them right now. You're not bringing them to like this house, so it's okay. It's okay. But I'm thinking maybe I'll try to sneak a peek. It's too tempting.
I don't have.
This is how Chazi cheats on his wife. He goes,
Cassandra, you haven't said anything in a while, so can I get Cassandra in case she hasn't felt like she could say what she wanted to say?
It's very nice to meet you, Cassandra.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you too.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'll just say, if anybody wants to buy me books, I'm perfectly fine with that.
What kind of book?
As a birthday present. Yeah.
I'll get you the New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs.
I have several.
You do really?
I have many editions of the New Testament in many different ways. Yes.
Okay. Let's.
Thanks for the offer. I'll take a Mikraot Gedolot if somebody wants to send that.
What is that?
I do not have Mikraot Gedolot.
Oh, really?
But yeah.
That's English and Targum.
Well.
How does one spell that?
How much is it?
Sorry, Jason.
Gedolot is what's referred to as the rabbinic Bible. It's basically the standard thing, and frankly, I never had a place to put it.
So it has the biblical text, and then it has, let's say, the major exegetes, medieval exegetes. So it has Rashi, it has Ramban, the Nachmanides, it has Rashi's grandson, Rashbam, and then it has a bunch of like and it has one of the Targums.
It was created by the Catholics, which we're very grateful for. And it is where the King James version of the Bible was translated from, including like they even looked into the commentaries to try to understand the translation. So it had a huge influence on Christianity as well. Thank God.
Okay. Happy birthday, Jacob. Thank you, everyone, for attending this week. We'll see you next week. That's all I have to say. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. That's very good. That's a good joke. Goodbye.